Hi, my name's Claire, 31 years old, a software engineer living in Austin, Texas. After nearly a decade of relentless work, I was able to buy myself a $350,000 condo, no loans, no help from anyone. I thought my family would be proud. Instead, they treated it as a shared family asset. At a family reunion in Fort Worth, my mother suddenly suggested I give the condo to my younger sister just because she was pregnant and about to get married. When I said no, she threw the cake in my face, right in front of everyone. No one defended me. Not a single apology. And then, they continued attacking me on social media. But if they thought I'd stay silent like I had for the past 31 years, they were wrong. I did something that made the entire family regret it for the rest of their lives, not with shouting, but with the law. This story isn't just about me. It might be about many of us, those who are constantly told to sacrifice for the family, while no one ever asks if we're okay. Where are you watching from? And if it were you in that situation, what would you do? Let me know in the comments after hearing the full story. I was born in Fort Worth, in a multi-generational Vietnamese household. I was the eldest child, the test run, the one who carried all the expectations but was never forgiven for falling short. My father was strict, firmly believing that men should be the pillars of the home, yet he spoiled my youngest sister like a princess. My mother was always busy, always doing something, but her heart leaned completely toward Lily. And me? I was the one who did well in school, followed the rules, and always played nice, but I was forever the older sister. The one who had to give in, who had to understand, who had to sacrifice. From a young age, I knew what it felt like to be the outsider in your own home. When I was 8, my mother forgot my birthday because she was taking Lily to ballet class. At 12, I asked to take extra math lessons, but it was considered too expensive, even though Lily was simultaneously being sent to a private piano academy. I don't blame Lily. She never asked for the favoritism. But she never turned it down either. When I was 16, I asked to attend a summer tech camp in Dallas, and my mother said, "Are you still stuck on studying?" But when Lily was in 10th grade, my mother spent nearly $5,000 to send her to a creative design course in California because Lily didn't fit into traditional school. When I spoke up, my mother looked at me like I had just desecrated something sacred. "You're the older sister. You have to think of your sibling." That sentence clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I was never good at talking back. I didn't know how to cry or beg. All I knew was how to work hard. That was how I proved I deserved to exist in that house. In my senior year, I stayed up late teaching myself programming, applied for scholarships to dozens of schools. I was eventually accepted into the University of Texas at Austin for computer science with a full ride. I remember the night I got the letter. I held the paper in my hands, heart pounding, and ran to show my mom only to hear her say, "Oh good, that saves us some money. Just don't forget to come home, your sister misses you when you're not around." I forced a smile, folded the letter, and realized that no matter what I did, I would always be the second choice in their hearts. Austin was the first place I could finally breathe. No one called me the older sister. No one expected me to give things up. I lived in the dorms, working part-time at the library and the student tech center. I didn't go home in the summers. I stayed to work at a small startup and gain experience. For all 4 years of college, I never asked my family for a single dollar. I didn't resent them for it because by then, I had stopped expecting anything. After graduation, I landed a job at a major software company in Austin. My starting salary was $68,000 a year, not high for a software engineer, but to me, it was everything. It was freedom. I rented a tiny studio in North Austin, 15 minutes from work by bus. The room barely fit a twin bed, a desk, and a little kitchenette. But it was the first place that felt like it was truly mine. I lived frugally to the point that my friends nicknamed me Claire Doesn't Spend. I didn't buy Starbucks, I didn't travel, I didn't splurge on shopping. I studied more at night and picked up freelance projects on the weekends. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account with a single, clear goal. One day, I would own a home of my own. Not a place they let me borrow. Not a house where I was a guest in my own bedroom, but one where I would be the owner. 8 years later, when my savings account hit $290,000, I received a $60,000 inheritance from my grandfather, the only person in the family who had ever looked at me with fairness in his eyes. I didn't hesitate. I found a 2-bedroom condo in East Austin, just 10 minutes from the office, close to the bus stop, the library, and even the old used bookstore I used to visit as a student. The place was old, with outdated pale yellow walls and worn carpet floors, but it was airy and full of potential. I bought it on the spot, no loans, no mortgage, no cosigner. $350,000 paid in full, every dollar earned and saved by me over nearly a decade. The day I held the keys and stepped into that empty condo, I didn't cry like in the movies. I just stood still, my back against the wall, listening to the slow beat of my own heart. No one called to congratulate me. No one asked if I needed help. But for the first time in my life, I felt proud and complete. I had climbed up on my own, with no one carrying me, no one holding my hand. And that made me value it more than anything else in the world. I didn't expect that just weeks later, that very accomplishment would become the reason they called me selfish and greedy. But that day, in a condo that still smelled faintly of fresh paint, I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking. Finally, I made it out. And I was wrong, I hadn't made it out completely. They were still out there, waiting, with their expectations and assumptions, ready to drag me back into my old place. But this time, I wasn't going to let them. One Tuesday evening, while I was brushing on a coat of storm gray paint over the bedroom wall, a color I had spent a whole month choosing from among hundreds of nearly identical shades, my phone rang. The screen lit up, Mom calling. I paused, paint roller mid-air, staring at the bright screen under the warm yellow light. Mom didn't usually call. She wasn't the type to check in. Most of our past interactions were brief, centered around something Lily needed. A resume she wanted me to fix, a few photos to retouch, or most recently, asking me to send a birthday gift to Lily's friend's baby, someone I'd never met. But this time, there was no text, no introduction, just a direct call right at dinner time. I wiped my hands on an old towel and picked up. "Hi, Mom? Claire, come home to Fort Worth this weekend. We're having a family gathering. There's a surprise to announce." Her voice rang with forced enthusiasm, pitched slightly higher than usual, like she'd rehearsed it in her head. I frowned, paint roller still hanging in the air. "A gathering? What's the occasion?" "It's good news, like I said," she repeated quickly, rushing on as if she didn't want to give me time to ask. "Oh, and bring a cake, okay? The chocolate mousse from Bella near your place. That famous shop, I just love it." I was surprised. She remembered the name of my favorite bakery, the one I always went to whenever I wanted to reward myself after a tough deadline. Bella is on South Congress, about 10 minutes from my condo, famous for its thick ganache-covered chocolate mousse cakes. Each one costs nearly $50 and has to be ordered 2 days in advance. Not the kind of cake someone would casually request unless they were trying to impress someone. "Why not just get a cake from somewhere near home?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, cakes in Fort Worth just aren't as good," she laughed awkwardly. "And you're driving, so it's convenient for you to bring one. Besides, it's been a while since you've come home. You should spend time with the family." I stayed silent for a few seconds, a wave of suspicion rising in my chest. The last time I was invited home was over a year ago, when Lily threw a get-together with her high school friends and needed someone to help clean before and after the event. They called it a family gathering, but in truth, I was just the one washing dishes, clearing tables, and enduring loud EDM blasting from Lily's group of friends. This time, something felt different. My mom had actually called, no cold text. Her voice was sugary, full of forced cheer, and she clearly wanted the announcement to feel like a surprise. And more than that, she asked me to bring an expensive cake from Austin. That little detail clicked into place like the final puzzle piece in a scheme I hadn't yet named. I hesitated. "Can you at least tell me what it's about? I've got some work plans this weekend." A brief silence passed on the other end before she responded quickly. It's just a little surprise. Your sister and Kevin will be there too. So will Uncle Hi, Aunt Linda, and the kids. Everyone's coming. I frowned. A gathering with both sides of the family? The kind of people who usually only show up for weddings or funerals? I wasn't naive. I knew that if my parents were inviting that many people and being secretive about the reason, then it wasn't going to be some simple good news. And if it was important enough to rally the entire extended family, I had a strong suspicion it had something to do with Lily. I almost said no. Partly because my gut told me to. Partly because work this week was intense. But then I thought about the looks I'd get if I didn't show up, how it would be spun into. Claire always isolates herself. She thinks she's better than us. Now that she has money, she acts like she doesn't need anyone. And I did want to know really what they were planning this time. All right, I said flatly. I'll come. I'll bring the cake. I heard Mom exhale, almost too relieved to hide it. Perfect. Try to be here by 4 on Saturday. Bring the cake, and if you can, wear that navy blue dress I saw in the photo last time. It suits you so well. I hung up and looked at the unfinished wall. The paint roller lay on the floor beside me. Something inside felt heavy, not quite sadness, not exactly anger. Just a familiar kind of exhaustion, like I was walking into a play where my role had already been written for me. It was always the same. I was Claire, the afterthought, the one called last, the one no one ever really listened to. But this time, I wasn't going to stay on the sidelines. If they'd prepared a stage, I'd prepare a place for myself, not to join their performance, but to dismantle it. And I didn't need reminding, the cake had to be ordered 2 days in advance. I opened the app, scheduled a chocolate mousse ganache, and quietly typed a note. Last time. I arrived in Fort Worth on Saturday afternoon, exactly at 3:58 p.m., just as Mom had asked. The old house that once belonged to my grandparents came into view after the final turn, still lined with its weathered white wooden fence and a maple tree whose fallen leaves scattered across the walkway. This used to be where I grew up, where I learned to ride a bike, where I buried myself in books to tune out my parents' arguments, where my grandfather told me fairy tales in a mix of Vietnamese and English. But ever since Grandma passed and the house was jointly left to Lily and me, I had rarely returned. The older I got, the less this place felt like home, and more like a museum of memories I'd tried to leave behind. There were already more than 5 cars parked tightly along the driveway. I recognized Uncle Hi's car, Aunt Linda's, and the sleek black SUV belonging to Kevin, Lily's fiancé, who was practically part of the family. I turned off the engine, grabbed the cake box from Bela that I'd driven to pick up at 6 a.m., and took a deep breath. On the silver wrapping was the shop's elegantly embossed logo, and I knew that when my mom saw it, she'd smile with satisfaction, like I was still the obedient daughter who did as she was told. But this time, I wasn't here to please anyone. The door opened the moment I rang the bell. My mother, pink lipstick, freshly curled hair, wearing that old pearl necklace she only brought out for special occasions, greeted me with the smile of a hostess. "Claire's here," she beamed. She gave me a quick hug and immediately took the cake box, as if that had been the true reason for my invitation. "Is this from Bela? I knew you wouldn't let me down." I didn't respond. I just nodded and stepped inside. The house was packed. Relatives squeezed together in the living room, the air filled with loud chatter and soft jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker near the dining table. I heard Uncle Hi bragging about his grandson making the school basketball team, and Aunt Linda's laughter as she teased Lily about her upcoming promotion. As I walked in, I could feel eyes sweeping over me, subtly checking for any change since the last time we met. Lily sat on the sofa, arm-linked with Kevin, dressed in a soft white shift dress, her face carefully made up to appear natural. I walked over and nodded politely at both of them. "Hi, sis," Lily smiled, a bit hesitant, though I couldn't tell if it was real or rehearsed. Kevin shook my hand politely, but his eyes flicked across me like he was sizing up something invisible. "Come sit down, we're about to eat," Mom said brightly, then turned to Aunt Linda with a sing-song tone. "Let me bring out the cake. The one Claire bought is expensive, it's from a famous shop in Austin. There was a chorus of impressed murmurs, and a few eyes landed on me as if I'd just accomplished something impressive even though no one asked how I was doing, how work was going, or what my new condo was like. I sat down at the dining table, choosing the seat farthest from Lily without drawing attention. The food was served: grilled meats, roasted potatoes, chicken salad, and for dessert the cake I'd brought. Mom pulled out the porcelain plates and ceremoniously sliced the cake, as though handing out a prestigious prize. After a few glasses of wine, the room buzzed louder, and Mom stood up, raising her glass. "Thank you all for being here today. It's rare for the whole family to be together, so this is truly special." She paused, turning to Lily. "And the main reason we've gathered is because we have some wonderful news. Lily is expecting." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, congratulations flew in all directions. I smiled politely, a reflex more than a feeling. Kevin placed his hand over Lily's belly, which didn't yet show, and gave a smug grin. "We're also engaged," Lily added. "The wedding will be this fall, in San Antonio." The room exploded again with excitement. My mother hugged Lily like she was a rare jewel, then turned to me. I knew that look all too well. It was the look right before she struck. "Claire," she began, her voice suspiciously sweet. "Your new condo, it's near downtown Austin, right?" I nodded. "Spacious, modern, with a great view. I saw the pictures, it's beautiful. And you live alone, right?" I took a sip of water, already feeling a chill settle in my chest. "Yes." She nodded slowly, then turned toward the entire table. "Everyone? Isn't Claire amazing? Her own place, stable, independent." I barely had time to exhale before she continued, "And Lily, well, she's starting a family now, expecting a baby. But they're still stuck in a tiny rental. A pregnant woman needs space and comfort. She can't stay in that cramped apartment forever, right?" A suspicious silence fell over the room. People began glancing at one another, then at me. My heart pounded, but I kept my face still. My mother smiled brightly, her voice as light as a breeze. I was thinking, if Claire could let Lily stay in the condo for a while, wouldn't that be meaningful? After all, you don't have a family yet. I froze. Kevin squeezed Lily's hand. Lily lowered her head, pretending to be shy. A younger cousin nodded. "Makes sense. Family's supposed to help each other." Aunt Linda chimed in. "Exactly. No need for Claire to take up all that space by herself." I set my glass down, my hand ice cold. In that moment, I understood. Every invitation, the unusual enthusiasm, the request for the cake from Austin, the suggestion to wear that navy dress, the presence of every relative, all of it hadn't been to celebrate Lily. It was to put me on display. This wasn't a party, it was an ambush, and I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. I sat there, stunned. For a few seconds, I thought maybe they were joking. That this was just some awkward prank at a family dinner, like when they used to hide my shoes as a child, or leave me to clean up the mess after Lily's birthday parties and pretend not to notice. But then I looked again. My mother was smiling. Not a joking or embarrassed smile, but one of certainty, one that knew it would win. She believed I'd nod. That I'd give in, just like I always had for the past 31 years. "You live alone, you're an engineer, you make good money. Are you really saying you can't help your sister by letting her have a place to settle down?" Mom spoke slowly, clearly, as if explaining something obvious to a child with no heart. "Don't you love your sister?" I felt the blood rush under my skin, hot and tight like it was ready to explode. I looked around. No one was smiling. No one said, "Mom, she worked her whole life for that condo." No one said, "Why would you ask this at a family gathering?" They just sat there, silent, a few nodding slightly, as if agreeing. As if giving up the home I'd spent my entire youth working for was the right, natural thing to do. I set my fork down, my voice steady and sharp. I don't agree." My mother's hand froze midair as she poured water. The air was sucked out of the room. Lily looked up, wide-eyed, her mouth parting like she wanted to protest but couldn't find words. Kevin frowned. "Claire," he began, but I held up my hand. "I worked nearly 10 years without stopping to earn that condo. I didn't borrow a cent from anyone. I worked day and night, lived off instant noodles, stayed in cramped rentals, turned down every vacation to save. And now, just because Lily's pregnant, I'm supposed to hand it over?" No one responded. But I could see it, Mom's expression shifting. From surprise, to anger, to that false look of hurt. "You're so ungrateful," she said, her voice breaking. "We raised you, fed you, paid for your education, and now that you're successful, you turn your back on your own sister. All you care about is money. You're selfish." I let out a laugh, not from humor, but bitterness. "You paid for my education? When I asked for advanced math classes, you said there was no money. But Lily got private piano lessons at $122 a month? When I earned a full scholarship, your only response was, 'At least we won't have to pay?' I live alone because I've never had a space of my own in this family. I built my life from the ground up. And now, you want to take that away to hand it to her just because she knows how to cry better than I do?" "Enough," my mother screamed, her face flushed red. "You have no heart. Your sister is about to become a mother, and you're hoarding a huge condo all for yourself. Cold-hearted people like you, no one will ever love you, not now, not when you're old and alone." That sentence hit like a slap, not because I believed it, but because it was so familiar. Too close to what I used to fear in my early years of independence, that I would always be seen as the outsider unless I surrendered. But this time, I didn't back down. "I'm not a sacrifice for Lily's choices," I said, each word striking the floor like nails being hammered in. "She has the right to choose her own path, and I have the right to keep what I worked so hard to achieve. I don't owe that condo to anyone. Not to you, not to her, not to a single person in this room." I thought those words would end things in the usual way, a shouting match, a few tears, and then me driving home with a heavy heart. But I was wrong. My mother stood up, her eyes wild like someone unhinged. She walked straight to the table by the kitchen, where I saw she had placed the cake I brought from Austin, the chocolate mousse I had gotten up at 6 a.m. to pick up, just to meet her request. She lifted the cake in both hands, didn't even glance at me, and in a moment of complete silence, hurled it at me like a final blow. The thick, smooth cream struck my face with a cold sting. The smell of chocolate, butter, and vanilla spread across my collar, stuck to my hair, slid down my cheek. I closed my eyes not to dodge it, but because I didn't want anyone to see them turn red. No one got up. No one stepped in. No one shouted, "What are you doing?" My father just sat with his head down, silent as always. Lily looked at me, no longer shocked, but with something else in her eyes, relief. Kevin placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze, like praise. The whole room froze in a suffocating cloud of sweetness and dead silence. I slowly wiped my face. The cream clung to my hands, soft and slick, like the last shred of respect being smeared away. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I simply stood, took a napkin to wipe my hands, picked up my purse, and walked toward the door. As I opened it, Mom screamed from behind, "Ungrateful brat, we should have cut you off a long time ago." I turned around, really looked at her for the first time. Not as a daughter still longing for love, but as a person looking at another person. "You don't get to cut me off, because you've never actually faced me." And then I walked out, cake still dripping from my collar onto the old carpet. But I didn't care. Because I knew. This time, I wasn't coming back. I drove the entire way from Fort Worth back to Austin in a kind of numb daze, like my soul had left my body, leaving behind only a shell that knew how to steer and press the gas pedal on instinct. My hair was still matted with dried frosting, now stiff and sticky. The cloying smell of chocolate clung to my collar, sometimes mixing with the faint scent of plastic from the hot steering wheel under the afternoon sun. I didn't stop. No rest areas, no water breaks, no music. 3.5 hours passed in complete silence, just the sound of tires grinding against asphalt, the wind hissing through the window crack, and a small but clear voice in my head whispering, "They didn't just humiliate you, they never saw you as family." I arrived back in Austin just as night fell. My apartment complex was quiet, the windows glowing with soft golden light so different from the chaos and noise of the old house I'd just left behind. I parked, turned off the engine, but didn't get out right away. I sat there in the dark, both hands resting on the steering wheel, my head leaned back against the seat, eyes staring blankly ahead. Every small movement made dried bits of frosting fall from my hair and shoulders, like the final remnants of the humiliation I had just endured. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel sad, I just felt tired. So tired I could barely breathe. I asked myself, why did I drive 3 hours just to have a cake thrown in my face? Was it hope? Was it the belief that somehow, family might change? After a while, I quietly stepped out of the car and made my way to my third-floor apartment. The place was dark, but the scent of new paint and plaster still lingered, the smell of effort, the smell of freedom. I sat down on the living room floor, my back against the wall, still not turning on the light. And in that darkness, with only the pale glow of my phone screen, I opened Facebook out of sheer muscle memory. The first notification appeared. "Your mom, Mrs. Hoang, has tagged you in a post." I tapped on it gently, and the post opened, plain as day, without a trace of subtlety. As a mother, nothing hurts more than seeing your eldest daughter refuse to share with her pregnant younger sister, even just a temporary place to stay. She lives alone, has everything, yet turns her back on the one who needs her most. I don't know what has made her so cold, I only know that I have failed. Below the post were dozens of comments. Relatives, my mom's old friends, people from her church group, even names I didn't recognize, all chimed in with disappointment. She's living the good life now and forgot where she came from. Family is about love, not fighting over square footage. End all. Lily is pregnant, this is when she needs support the most. How could Claire be so heartless? Not a single comment mentioned the cake thrown in my face. Not one acknowledged that the condo was something I had worked nearly a decade to afford. No one stopped to ask, what happened before Claire said no? I read every word, each sentence cutting into the last sliver of self-worth I thought I'd preserved. My mother hadn't just humiliated me at the gathering, she turned me into a spectacle on social media, cast me as the selfish daughter so that people would pity Lily and lift her up as the heartbroken, yet noble, mother. I never imagined she would treat me like an enemy, but that post left no doubt. I set the phone down on the floor. My eyes remained open, but I saw nothing. My mind was blank, but my chest felt crushed, like something was sitting on it. Silence wrapped around the room like stone. And in that moment, surrounded by the cold blue light of the screen and the walls I had built with my own hands, I knew I had reached the end of my tolerance. I used to think that if I stayed quiet and lived well, they would eventually see me differently. I used to believe that success would earn their respect, but it hadn't. They didn't need me to succeed. They only needed me to obey. They didn't want my love. They wanted my property. And if that was the only reason they remembered my name, then it was time to sever the tie. I stood up and walked into the bathroom, facing myself in the mirror, hair tangled, collar stained with chocolate, eyes sunken with exhaustion. I peeled the dried frosting from my hair, piece by piece, slowly, gently, without rushing. As if I weren't just cleaning off the mess, but shedding a part of my past I was finally ready to leave behind. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't stay silent for another second. And this time, I wouldn't just wipe my face clean. I would wipe clean the way they thought about me, with action, with legal clarity, with finality, and with the self-respect I should have protected long ago. I didn't sleep that night. After washing my hair 3 times and still catching faint hints of chocolate around my pajama collar, I sat in the kitchen, clutching a mug of cold tea, staring at an old note tucked inside a journal. Grandfather's will, photocopy, not yet recertified. I pulled it out, opened the folded pages, and stared at the lines I had read over and over through the years but never thought I'd actually use. My grandfather left behind only one piece of property when he passed, the house in Fort Worth. And in the will, every word was written clearly. I divide the ownership of this house equally between my two granddaughters, Claire Hong and Lily Hong, 50% each. Their parents may reside in the home until death or until the two granddaughters agree on future ownership. I remembered when he handed me that document. He simply smiled and said, "One day, you'll need this. And when that day comes, use it to hold on to yourself." Back then, I didn't understand. But now, I understood completely. The next morning, I walked into a law office, no appointment. My eyes were dark with fatigue, my coat still smelled faintly of paint from a few days earlier, but I didn't care. I entered the red brick building on 6th Street with the small sign that read, Blackwell and Associates, Real Estate and Family Law. The receptionist raised her eyebrows, probably thinking I'd just come from some disaster. But I simply said, voice steady, "I need to speak with an attorney about inherited property. Urgently." 15 minutes later, I was sitting in a small room with a heavy wooden desk. Across from me sat a man in his 50s, white shirt, slim glasses, eyes sharp but composed. Jeremy Blackwell, senior attorney. I handed him the copy of the will and told him everything from the ambush at the dinner table to the post on social media. I also unlocked my phone and played him a voice recording of the ambush conversation where my mother hinted, then blatantly demanded I hand over my condo. Jeremy listened closely, then nodded. "You have valid documentation. With this will, you legally own 50% of the house. Your parents are merely occupants. They have no authority to make decisions about it." He set his pen down and looked me in the eye. "What do you want to do?" I answered without hesitation. "I want to issue a formal request to sell the house. If Lily wants to keep it, she must buy out my half at market value. Otherwise, the house gets sold and split exactly as the will says." "No time. Are you sure?" Jeremy asked. "They'll be furious. They'll come after you emotionally, maybe even publicly." I nodded calmly, clearly, for the first time in years. I have nothing left to lose. The next day, Jeremy's office sent out the official notice, along with a 15-day window to begin negotiations. I knew the storm was coming, but this time, I was ready. And I didn't have to wait long. On the third afternoon, just as I got home from work and was taking off my shoes by the doorbell rang rapid, urgent, like someone was trying to break it. I walked over, glanced through the peephole, and wasn't surprised to see my parents, Lily, and Kevin standing right outside. My mother wore her old floral coat, her face flushed with rage. My father stood with arms crossed like a statue. Lily held one hand over her belly, which still didn't show, but looked at me like I'd just stabbed her unborn child. "Claire!" My mother screamed, the first time I'd ever heard my name shouted like an accusation. "Open the door." "What are you doing? Sending a letter to sell the house? Are you out of your mind?" I didn't open it. I stood behind the door, my hands trembling, but my mind clear enough to open my recording app and hit the red button. "You really want to throw your entire family out over some stupid condo?" my father growled. "You honestly want to see your own parents dragging suitcases, looking for a place to stay?" Kevin jumped in, his voice sharp with contempt. "Do you even have a heart? Your sister is pregnant, and you're lawyering up to break this family apart." I stayed silent. Every word they said, I recorded. No one mentioned the cake, no one offered an apology. They weren't here to make peace. They came to scare me, to guilt-trip me, to force me into submission just like every time before. "Ingrate," my mother shrieked, her voice cracking like she was the one wronged. "We should have never given birth to you. A daughter like you is a disgrace to this family." I stood still, took a deep breath, and calmly replied through the door. "I've recorded everything. Please leave. From now on, all communication will go through my attorney." There was a pause. Then came the sound of angry footsteps retreating, followed by the elevator door closing with a final metallic click. I waited one more minute, then stopped the recording. That night, I sent the audio file to Jeremy. The next morning, he called me back. "They're only hurting themselves," he said. "This recording can be used to demonstrate harassment and intimidation. If necessary, I'll file for a restraining order." Woo. I sat by the window, morning light streaming softly through the sheer curtains, brushing my cheek like a whisper. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of something. Not because I was stronger, but because I wasn't afraid anymore. They could yell, slander, try to shame me in front of the world. But they no longer had power over me through guilt, through family obligations, or through the label of eldest daughter. All in. For the first time, I knew for sure I wasn't backing down, and this time, I was going all the way. The mediation was scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m., at the office of attorney Jeremy Blackwell, on the 6th floor of a glass tower in downtown Austin. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit, hair neatly pinned up, wearing just enough makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes. I wasn't there to look pretty. I was there to look prepared, professional, and unshakable. When Jeremy walked into the lobby, he gave me a nod, his eyes quietly approving. "You came prepared," he said. I smiled not for politeness, but because for the first time in my life, I felt it deep in my bones. I was no longer walking into this battle alone. The mediation took place in a closed conference room. On my side sat Jeremy and a legal assistant. On theirs, my father, my mother, Lily, and Kevin, along with an older female attorney, her silver hair tied low, face serious and unreadable. They entered without looking at me, as if I were just a shadow in the brightly lit room. My mother wore dark sunglasses, but I could tell her makeup had been carefully applied. Lily wore a pastel maternity dress, though her belly hadn't begun to show. Kevin, cold as ever, sat stiffly with a blazer over his shoulders like he was attending a real estate contract signing. The session began with their lawyer speaking first, her tone full of emotion. "My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Wong, have lived in this home for nearly 40 years. To be forced into selling it in their old age would be emotionally devastating. Furthermore, with their youngest daughter currently pregnant, the family is in a particularly vulnerable stage and needs stability. Miss Claire's unilateral actions have shown a grave lack of compassion and have caused serious distress for the entire family." I didn't react. I had predicted every word. Then it was Jeremy's turn. He opened his laptop and projected a clip from my doorbell camera, my mother screaming, my father pounding on the door, Kevin shouting threats. Next, he played an audio recording. My voice clearly asserting my legal 50% ownership, followed by my mother calling me ungrateful, and Lily sobbing that I was kicking the whole family onto the street. Finally, Jeremy displayed a screenshot of my mother's Facebook post, publicly painting me as someone without a heart. The room grew heavy. Their attorney requested a recess to confer with her clients. 15 minutes later, they returned. My mother's expression had changed, not anger, but collapse. Not remorse, but the recognition that the power dynamic had shifted. They had no moves left to play. Their lawyer spoke again. "My clients accept the proposal, the house will be sold, proceeds split evenly. On the condition that they are given 1 month to vacate." Jeremy nodded without glancing at me. We agreed to the timeline. It seemed the meeting was coming to an end until my mother suddenly spoke. She took off her sunglasses, eyes red and watery, her voice hoarse. "Claire, I know I was wrong. I'm sorry about the cake. I just lost control because I was worried about your sister. I didn't think you would take things this far." I looked up at her for the first time since the mediation began. But there was no anger left, no bitterness. Just a calm clarity forged through years of being dismissed. "No one asked what I needed for 31 years, I said. Voice steady, not dramatic, just quietly true. "I'm not angry that you favored her, I'm not asking for equal love. But I'm tired of always being the one to sacrifice, the one to stay silent to keep the peace. This is the first time I've stood up for myself, and I'm not backing down." She said nothing. Kevin squeezed Lily's shoulder. She bowed her head. I couldn't tell whether it was shame or just surrender. Jeremy shook hands with their side, then turned to me. I'll begin the process of listing the house. It should be finalized in about 2 months. I stood, gathered my documents, and prepared to leave the room. My mother called out after me. Claire, are you sure you don't want to talk things through? After all, we're still family. I stopped, turned slightly, my gaze softening but my voice unwavering. I'm not the one who walked away from this family. You pushed me out. With a cake. With a Facebook post. With your silence when I needed anyone to speak up for me. Then I turned back and walked out without looking over my shoulder. My footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor not as someone retreating, but as someone finally freed. No one called after me. Not one word. And I knew that would be the last time I ever stepped into a mediation of any kind, because from now on, I don't need reconciliation to live as myself. The house in Fort Worth was officially listed in the second week after the mediation. All the paperwork was processed smoothly faster than I expected. Maybe because Jeremy was well-versed in messy family asset cases like this. Or maybe because both sides simply wanted it to be over. With every signature, every stamp, I felt lighter, like unfastening the small metal links that had quietly bound me to a past I never chose. The house was photographed, posted on real estate platforms, and held open houses every Saturday. I didn't attend any of them. I didn't need to return to the place where a cake was weaponized against me. But I followed the listing updates through email, watched the view count grow, read through each offer, and felt something strange rise within me. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't sadness either. It was more like witnessing a chapter quietly close. No pain, no nostalgia, just peace. 1 month later, the house officially had new owners. A young couple from Dallas, moving in with their 3-year-old daughter, wanting to live closer to her grandparents. They negotiated quickly, offered close to asking, and paid on time. After legal fees, agent commission, and taxes, my share came out to just over $181,000 wired directly into my bank account. I didn't spend it right away. No shopping sprees, no celebratory dinners. I did what I've always done best. I planned. I met with an independent financial advisor, someone with no ties to my family or their banks. Her name was Melissa, the same age as me, formerly with an investment firm before opening her own practice. We sat down over coffee and went through my 5, 10, and 20-year financial goals. In the end, I chose a portfolio with a mix of dividend stocks, municipal bonds, and a portion in small-scale commercial real estate through REITs. Nothing too risky, but not idle either. Just like me, cautious, but not willing to stay boxed in. Meanwhile, my parents quietly moved out of the Fort Worth house. Jeremy informed me they didn't put up a fight, didn't delay anything, they were simply tired. I didn't receive a call, no message. No thank you. They moved to Arlington to live with Lily and Kevin in a modest 2-story home in the suburbs. I heard they had to take out a loan to cover the remaining cost after using Lily's portion as a down payment. The house was smaller, farther from the city, on a bus line with fewer stops. And a part of me felt something, not regret for what happened, not guilt, but a quiet sadness. Not because they lost the house, but because they never understood why I had to do what I did. I returned to my work and to my apartment, the only place that had ever truly belonged to me. After everything that had happened, I realized I had never really lived in a home, not in the true sense of the word. But now, things were different. I began completing the little corners I'd left unfinished, either out of busyness or hesitation. I finally ordered the thick ash gray wool rug for the living room, the one I'd added to my cart so many times only to delete it later. I hired a carpenter to install built-in shelves in the office where I'd place all my engineering books, alongside the old novels my grandfather used to read. I bought a few plants, a large monstera by the sofa, some dried lavender for the dining table. I repainted the balcony door in warm white and hung sheer curtains. The afternoon light suddenly felt gentler as it passed through that soft fabric. My bedroom finally had a real wooden bed, not just a mattress on a metal frame like when I first graduated. The sheets were cotton satin, smooth, in deep moss green. I installed wall sconces by hand, changed out the light switch, reattached a corner of wallpaper that had peeled up all slowly, deliberately. Not because I was a perfectionist, but because I wanted this place to become a space that healed. I wanted to come home each evening, after a long day, and feel not like I had something to prove but like I was safe. One afternoon, after finishing the new wood flooring in the dining area, I stood in the middle of the apartment, my hands still dusty with sawdust, and realized I had turned this place into a home. Not just with materials, but with resolve. Every tile, every screw, every light bulb was a statement that I had the right to exist exactly as I am, in a space that is mine, not for anyone else. No one has the right to ask me to give up pieces of my life to make room for theirs. No one gets to call it sacrifice for family when they've never sacrificed a thing for me. The apartment is still small, not a mansion, not a penthouse. But it's quiet, clean, filled with light. And more than anything, it's the first thing I've ever owned that wasn't meant to please anyone, wasn't meant to prove anything to my family, wasn't traded for recognition. It's home in the truest and freest sense of the word. That evening, the Austin sky melted into a soft wash of peach and rose. I sat on the balcony of my apartment, feet resting on the edge of the chair, hands cupped around a still warm mug of herbal tea, eyes watching the final rays of sunlight slip over rooftops and catch on the glass windows of the buildings across from me. Everything was quiet. Only the occasional bird call echoed faintly in the distance, the breeze stirred the roadside trees, and my own breathing filled the silence slow, steady, peaceful. My phone lit up on the table. A message appeared from a friend I hadn't seen in years, someone who still lingered on the edge between me and the world I used to belong to. It read, "Lily just had a baby boy. Both mom and baby are healthy." I stared at the screen for a long moment. No clear feeling surfaced. Not joy, not anger, not resentment. Just a sense of unfamiliarity, like hearing about an old acquaintance who had long since drifted from my orbit. There were no congratulations, no tears. Just one quiet thought. So they've begun a new circle. I turned the phone over, face down on the table, then reached for the drawer beside the balcony. Inside was an old picture frame, a photo of me at 8 years old, sitting in Grandpa's lap, both of us laughing. My eyes in that photo held a kind of belief I only now understood. It was the last moment in my life I had felt truly loved without condition. I gently removed the photo from the frame, and with my fingertip, I softly touched his face. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice as soft as a breeze. "Thank you for believing I was worthy." He was the only one in the family who never compared me to Lily. Never told me to quiet down or step aside. He was the one who left me half the house, not for its financial value, but because he knew, one day, I would need to stand up for myself. And he was right. I stayed a little longer, letting the last light of the sunset touch my cheek warm, but never burning. Then I stood up, stepped inside, and closed the balcony door behind me. In the small kitchen, the soup I had made that morning was still warm inside a gray ceramic pot. I turned on the light, reached for a white porcelain bowl, ladled the soup in, and set it on the table. There was no one to eat with me. No conversation, no laughter echoing through the room. But I didn't feel alone. Because for the first time in my life, I felt whole without needing anyone's approval, without playing a role in someone else's story. Without having to be the good one, just to exist in a family that never really saw me. I don't know if my mother will ever feel regret. I don't know if Lily will ever tell her son about the aunt he'll never meet, or if I'll just remain a blurry figure, a name never spoken. But none of that matters anymore. Because I'm no longer living this life to prove anything to them. I live to be myself. To hold on to what I've fought hard to earn. To never bow just because someone else thinks I should sacrifice. I choose dignity over obedience. I choose self-respect over toxic loyalty. And if you've made it this far, if you've ever been asked to give up your place, to stay silent so someone else could shine, to live for validation from those who never truly heard you, then I want you to remember this. Real family will never ask you to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. They won't throw cake in your face and call it love. They won't take your kindness for granted, then turn their backs when you finally say no. You don't have to suffer to be accepted. You don't have to give everything to be loved. And if you need to, you have the right to stand up, walk away, and rebuild your own home. With your hands, with your scars, and with your courage. Just like I did. And I've never looked back.